So as you can see, I've went ahead and labeled each of my thumbnails: detached, touching, overlapping, penetrating, union, subtraction, intersection, and coinciding. And those are the compound shape interactions that I'm going to create in each of these corresponding thumbnails using a square and a triangle this time. So the examples that we covered in the earlier part of the module this week were 2 circles. I made a rough sketch of those examples. So make a rough sketch of those examples and then refer back to the module where the compound shapes are covered, the compound shape interactions, and read the definition so that you understand and can articulate what's going on in each one of these interactions before you get started. Okay. So what I've done, instead of, you can just sketch out if you want different shape interactions using, I want you to try and use the square and a triangle instead of the circles, just so that you can play with different shapes. But you can also cut out a stencil if you'd like. Okay, so you don't have to cut out a stencil, but I like to, like play with the stencil so that I don't have to commit, and then I can kind of play around with different orientations. You don't have to put your shapes right in the center of these thumbnails. You can move them around in any area you want within the thumbnail, but try to accomplish this interaction. So the first one is detached, so any combination where they're not touching, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just trace this little stencil I made, and they don't have to be square to the thumbnail, so I'm just gonna kind of move it around a little bit. Okay. And I'm gonna use a ruler to darken that in using a 4B pencil so it's pretty dark. So later I will shade these in, but for now I'm just going to create the interactions. Okay, so you have 2 shapes in the first thumbnail that are detached. So with the overlapping, the triangle is on top of the square. Okay. Penetrating is kind of similar to the overlapping, only if you can imagine the overlap being 2 different shapes that are one on top of the other, right? So this shape is covering up part of this shape. Okay. With penetrating, it's different. If I don't have anything transparent to show you, but if you think of 2 transparent things like tracing paper and this on top of the tracing paper, where they're overlapping, but because they're transparent, you can see the area underneath the overlap. Whereas with when you have overlapping, when you have one object on top of another, you can't see the area that's, when these are opaque objects, you can't see the shape of the area underneath the overlap. In a union, they become one shape, right? So it's almost like they've merged together and it becomes one whole shape, right? So in a union, the two separate shapes create a brand new, bigger shape with a different outer contour edge. Subtraction is where you have one shape cutting into another shape. So I'm going to cut out this triangular section. Okay, and then so I'm going to cut out this triangular section from the square. And I'm going to use a dotted line to just represent where the edges are of the shape that is doing the cutting, right? But I'll go ahead and darken in the shape that has been cut into. So you've subtracted a portion of the shape of the triangle from a portion of the shape of the square. Okay, so with an intersection, you have only the area where the overlap is occurring remains, and then the extra stuff where the shapes are not overlapping each other become irrelevant. In an intersection relationship, it's going to be the area where the overlap is occurring that becomes the most important part of the relationship. So let me go ahead and keep your lines nice and light here because you want to get rid of them later. Intersection where the two shapes overlap remains. It's the most significant part of the relationship, and we'll just represent the two outer shapes with a dotted line. And then the coinciding is where one shape completely overlaps the other shape. Okay, so in this, if the two shapes that are overlapping each other are the same, like in this example, if both are the same size circle and they're overlapping each other, coinciding, then it's going to look like there's one circle because the other one is hiding behind the top circle. But in this case, I'm going to coincide the square and the triangle. I'm going to coincide the square and the triangle with the triangle on the top. And so really the part of the square that's hidden is where the triangle appears. Okay, but if I were to draw the triangle first, and then the square is on top of the triangle, obviously then there would be nothing, no part of the triangle showing, and it would just be a solid square. Okay, so we're going to shade these in. We're going to practice shading with our values, pulling out our value scale, but before you shade these in with your values, this is what your layout should look like.